Hi, welcome to this brief learning management system primer. I'm Jeff Cobb.
And I'm Salisa Steele, and we're going to spend the next few minutes explaining what a learning management system, or LMS, is and what you should and shouldn't expect from one. To do this, we'll be drawing on the nearly 40 years experience that Jeff and I together have in the e-learning world. For many of those years, we ran our own LMS and e-learning content company. We designed, developed, and implemented our own LMS. More recently, we focused on working with organizations that sell adult lifelong learning, helping them to find appropriate learning technology platforms.
And we'll stress up front that most of our experience is with what we characterize as market-facing learning businesses. Again, these are organizations that market and sell education to members and to customers. And we found over the years that the requirements of these types of organizations are much different from, say, the traditional corporate training department or academic institutions. And we'll talk about some of those differences as we move through this video.
Before we go much further, though, we should define what an LMS is. The acronym stands for Learning Management System, and as the name suggests, it's a system, meaning a software application or web-based technology used to administer and deliver learning activities. But what's meant by administer and deliver, and what's meant by learning activities? Answering those questions isn't completely straightforward. Traditionally, LMSs have excelled at a fairly basic but essential set of tasks for managing learners and providing them with access to learning content. An LMS will enable you to enroll learners in courses. It will enable your learners to launch and access those courses. And it will enable you to track learners' activity, scores, and completion of courses. It will also provide basic testing and generate reports.
But most learning businesses would not be satisfied with that standard traditional core LMS functionality. They tend to want something more to go along with those baseline capabilities. Exactly what that more is varies, but common optional or add-on functionalities for LMSs include things like content authoring tools to enable you to create courses and other learning content, integrated capabilities for managing webinars, capabilities for scheduling and managing classroom-based learning, collaboration and social tools like discussion boards that allow learners to communicate with instructors and each other, more sophisticated assessment tools that include things like randomization and question banks, capabilities for managing and tracking continuing education credit, certification requirements, and the issuance of certificates and badges, e-commerce functionality for selling enrollments, and established integrations with other platforms that will need to send data to or receive data from the LMS.
Of course, which of these capabilities any specific LMS has can vary significantly, and there's been a lot of blurring of the lines with learning technology platforms. Some platforms that started out as webinar systems now have more traditional LMS functionality for launching and tracking self-paced learning content. Platforms that were originally focused on authoring content and creating self-paced courses have added the ability for learners to access the content that's authored and for administrators to see their performance. And depending on their origins, different platforms will have different strengths and different functionalities.
In our experience, there's a subset of the capabilities we just covered that tend to be particularly important for market-facing learning businesses. Because these are businesses that sell education, an e-commerce orientation is especially important. This usually means that the LMS will have capabilities for managing and displaying a catalog to prospective learners, as well as a shopping cart for taking payment information and passing it to one of the established e-commerce payment gateways like Payflow, Authorize.net, or Stripe. To the extent the LMS doesn't have these capabilities itself, it should have an easy plug-and-play approach for connecting to one or more third-party e-commerce platforms.
In addition, market-facing LMSs are generally going to provide tools that help with the marketing of your educational offerings. These may include ways to suggest other courses to enrollees in one course that might interest them. It might include ways to offer free demonstration content, ways to collect and display reviews, or, in connection with the e-commerce functionality, ways to offer discounts and other incentives.
As mentioned earlier, many market-facing systems are going to have capabilities for managing things like continuing education, certification, and the issuance of certificates. Most LMSs that were built for corporate training have few, if any, capabilities in these areas, and even academic-oriented LMSs tend to rely on the student information systems or other software that colleges and universities typically use for addressing these needs.
Finally, as noted earlier, most LMSs have capabilities for integrating with other platforms, but market-facing LMSs typically already have integrations developed for the types of platforms that matter to learning businesses. These include things like association management systems, or AMSs, customer relationship management systems, or CRMs, and email marketing platforms. Again, the degree to which a specific platform addresses each of these areas is going to vary, but the availability of these types of capabilities will rule out a large percentage of the hundreds of LMSs available, making it much less overwhelming for you to choose the right system. And what's going to narrow the field of possibilities even more is the familiarity of the vendor with specific business models. For example, experience with associations, small business, or other types of organizations.
So having offered an overview of what an LMS is and the capabilities to look for in a market-facing system, it's also important to stress what an LMS is not. We found over many years of working with learning businesses to choose systems that sometimes more is expected of an LMS than it was really designed to deliver. For example, while an LMS can capture a variety of data about your learners, it's really not meant to be a replacement for a membership management or customer management system. These systems are typically going to have a much wider and more sophisticated range of features for handling data about your ongoing interactions with members and customers than an LMS is going to have.
An LMS is also not typically going to be a replacement for a true web content management system, or CMS. A possible exception to this is if selling education is your sole business and you're just starting out. There are certain LMSs that are good enough that you may be able to provide your general web presence through the LMS. But over time, and for businesses that have already been up and running for a while, an LMS simply is not going to have the rich range of features that a dedicated CMS will have for managing your website.
The same is true for email marketing. While some LMSs get very sophisticated in enabling you to manage email communications with your learners, they simply aren't meant to do things like marketing campaigns or tracking results like click-throughs or managing your list in the way that a dedicated email system would.
In the vast majority of cases, an LMS is also not a webinar platform. Most will integrate with one or more of the popular platforms like Zoom, GoToWebinar, or WebEx, but only a handful have native webinar capabilities. And those are the ones that started out as webinar platforms initially and then evolved to add in some of the registration, tracking, and other capabilities of traditional LMSs.
Finally, as a rule, LMSs do not enable you to author content that can be easily transferred to a different platform. While many LMSs have some level of course authoring tools, the courses they create will really only work in the specific LMS where they're created. They can't be exported. If you plan to develop a lot of courses and really want to ensure that they can be used in a different LMS down the road, for example, if you switch systems, then we strongly encourage you to author your courses using specialized course authoring software like Articulate Storyline, Lectora, iSpring, or Adobe Captivate. Alternatively, you can use a specialized web-based learning content management system, or LCMS, and this includes platforms like Xyleme or Domino. The benefit of using one of these approaches is that they enable you to create content that conforms to e-learning industry standards for content portability. Basically, you won't be tied to any specific LMS platform.
The main takeaway from these points is that an LMS is typically going to be just one system within a network of systems that a learning business will use. So, as you're thinking about which LMS is right for you, be sure to think about the other systems you're using or anticipate using, and make sure the LMS you select is capable of communicating appropriately with those systems.
So that's our brief learning management system primer. To the extent that you haven't already, we encourage you to visit Review My LMS, a site dedicated specifically to market-facing LMSs, and where you'll find reviews and ratings submitted by peers at other learning businesses. By starting at Review My LMS, you'll be able to narrow your potential selection of LMSs for your learning business quickly and efficiently.
Thanks for your time, and please feel free to reach out to us with any questions or comments.